Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Anna Lungley, Dentsu International's Chief Sustainability Officer. Welcome to the Dentsu International Women's Day Global Webinar Series. It's 2021, but there are still taboos that stop women from feeling fully empowered to proactively manage their health. Communications has a huge role to play, from raising awareness to challenging perceptions, both within our business and society as a whole. And in this panel, we'll explore how we're opening up those communications channels and choosing to challenge attitudes through our work and the way that we work, empowering women to make better and more informed choices about their health. I'm joined by an incredible group of women who are challenging the status quo and tackling some of the biggest taboos in women's health today. Farah Kabir is the co-founder of Hanx, an investment banker who took the leap and co-founded Hanx in 2018, spurred on by the desire to smash taboos around sex and intimate health. Winner of London Asian Business Awards Entrepreneur of the Year, Farah continues to make waves and challenge perceptions. Our second panelist, joining us from Amsterdam, is Kika Douglas from dentsuAchtung, a creative director with a background in psychology. And Kika has worked with some leading brands, including Nike, Coca-Cola, P&G, and Sephora, to create award-winning magical campaigns that change mindsets. And she is focused on challenging women-related stereotypes and is now writing a book. So we will chat about that today. Our third panelist is Anna Moulton. She's our Chief HR Officer at Dentsu International. She joined Dentsu 7 years ago from Accenture and since then has championed an inclusive, values-led culture, support our people to be the best they can be. She is a passionate advocate of mental health and well-being, as well as diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and has personally championed the adoption of new internal targets to support the creation of diverse leadership teams all the way through to the Global Executive Board. And finally, Lilies Njanga, Africa Director of Malaria No More UK. Lilies has a wealth of experience in international development with a particular focus on health and education. She is a board member of Access to Medicine's platform and Spur Africa, and we are very grateful she has been able to join us today, fresh from her recent appearance on CNBC, where she was discussing the launch of Draw the Line, a star-studded campaign created by Dentsu for Malaria No More with the aim of starting a movement to end malaria, a disease that disproportionately affects women. So another area we'll cover today. And so welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining. Farah, I will come to you first. Hanx is certainly challenging the status quo with a very different approach to other brands. So tell us, what is it that you are doing so differently?
Hi, thank you for having me on this panel. So Hanx is a brand that creates products and services designed with women in mind. And we started with condoms because we found that the products on the market were garishly packaged, promoting a man's conquest, and frankly, you're baffled by the choice. It all started when we spotted a gap in the market here. Both myself and my friends were coming off hormonal contraceptives because of the side effects such as weight gain, mood swings, skin changes, etc. And so the only real option for us was condoms because they're hormone free. But when you go down that condom aisle, there is nothing that speaks to women. And so alongside myself, my co-founder, Sarah, who's a gynecology doctor, we decided to find out from women exactly what they wanted from a condom brand before we decided to pack up our day jobs in investment banking and medicine to start selling Johnnies. So we surveyed 2,000 women to find out what they wanted, and the output was Hanx. Women care about what they want in and in their bodies. They want transparency on ingredients, no nasty chemicals, and chic packaging. So we started with condoms. We've quite quickly moved on to lubricants and other sexual and intimate wellness products, most recently including vaginal health treatments delivered directly to your door.
That's fantastic, very inspiring indeed, and clearly a market opportunity. And one of the things that's been on the news quite recently is actually the pandemic has hampered women's access. So have you seen an explosion in interest as a result of lockdown?
Yes, certainly. So we've seen online, obviously people can't date and can't go out and the dating apps they're using. So our consumer base has changed. But what we found is when lockdown first hit, actually more and more women couldn't get access to their contraceptive pills if they weren't using condoms. That's possibly because they couldn't get a GP appointment or blood pressure checks. So we quite quickly pivoted our business to launch products serving our consumers. We launched a hormone harmony kit that effectively helps women who are coming off hormonal contraceptives tackle the side effects that come with that, such as we've got skin changes. So we partner with a Korea skincare brand. You get sugar cravings. We partner with Candy Kittens, pucker for cramps, etc., and some co-blended vitamins as well, specifically to support hormonal changes.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned that was a result of some personal experience as well.
Yes, exactly. As I mentioned earlier, we, alongside myself and my friends also face issues, side effects from hormonal contraceptives that aren't actually spoken about. And when you think about often women, when they get their first contraceptive pill, it's very young, usually 15, 16, and they're given for various reasons beyond just contraception. It's for acne, for example, but no one ever discusses the side effects of that, particularly mental and physical health.
Yeah, that's very important. And that's actually something that you have in common with another of our panelists, Kika. And Kika, you had your own personal experience. In fact, it was actually a very positive experience that led you to reconsider your own reproductive health and hormones in particular. And you're now writing a book about this.
Yes, I am. And well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really excited to be part of this conversation. And as Farah said, hormonal birth control is something they give you very young. And I think as a woman growing up, you experience a lot of change in your body that you don't really understand. And I actually was a healthy woman, had no health issue, but I did experience a lot of changes in energy, in skin, and I wanted to know more about it and understand it. So I started tracking my cycle with a period tracker. And when I started tracking it, well, I just started going down this research route and understanding things about my cycle, which led me to learn more about my hormones. And I was really surprised to find out all the things hormones influence, but not only in a negative way, which tends to be the stigma and the way we talk about hormones when it comes to women, but also when you balance your hormones and you know what you have to do to balance your hormones in a really positive way. And this led me and a group of 8 other women to write a book about it, because this isn't something that people talk about or that other women talk about or that you're educated in school. Getting to know your hormones, understanding how they affect every level of your existence, not only your reproductive health, but also your physical well-being, your mental health, your motivation, your drive. And yeah, that led us together with a doctor, an endocrinologist, to write a book about hormones where we really challenge this stigma. We created 7 characters to represent 7 of the most important hormones in women's reproductive health, and aiming to create a book that is interesting for young girls as soon as they get their period, and also women or when they go through menopause, to really gain control of your well-being by understanding your hormones better.
That's amazing. And actually that taps into what Farah was saying about actually young girls who actually start to experience this and don't actually have a lot of guidance or information. So targeting that audience and making it is fantastic. And you mentioned actually that you'd been using the word period tracker, and period is the word that you have an issue with, isn't it? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny. I'm not Dutch, but now I do live and work in Holland. And this is an idea that somebody from my team came up with, who is actually Dutch, a really brilliant idea, I think. And the issue is that in Dutch, the word for period is ongesteld, which means unwell, and which is a bit of a sad word, right? For something as beautiful as a period. I mean, it defines so many things of womanhood. So we're starting now a campaign to find a new word for it, and to invite all women in the Netherlands to come up with that word and define what a period means for them. Also because unwell, of all words, it's such a non-representative thing of what your period is. It feels like when you are on your period, you can't do anything. And we wanted to add to this campaign a layer of content where we show all the amazing things women have done in their period, while being unwell, quote unquote. So yes, that's something we are now working on.
Well, that's a wonderful sort of positive and uplifting story. But you also shared with me that actually, you know, hormones, they can be superpowers. I think the word you use is superpowers, which is wonderful. But sometimes they can actually impact us in different ways. And you learned this through a friend who struggled to diagnose her own hormone imbalance, I think until she went to South America. Could you tell us a little bit about that story and how that shaped your thinking?
Yes, absolutely. So this was one of the experiences before the book, and a friend of mine who also worked in advertising, coincidentally, had a very C-level job and had gone through a lot of stress during a long period of time. And after that, well, she ended up leaving her job because she couldn't take anything anymore. Her body was imbalanced. She had gained a lot of weight. There was no way she could lose weight. She was depressed. Her hair was falling. And she had gone to all these doctors and everybody told her she was fine. And she says, well, I'm not fine because this is not me. I mean, look at me. I'm overweight. I don't know, almost like 15 kilos. I don't sleep. I'm sad. And she took off work and she decided to go and visit a friend of hers in, I think it was Puerto Rico. And her mom's friend was actually a hormone doctor. And when she saw her and she listened to her story, she said, you know, has anybody of all these doctors you've visited asked you to take a hormone test to see the levels of your hormones? And she said, no, actually, not any of the, I think, 6 doctors I've visited have asked me for this. So when she took it, there was, of course, a huge imbalance. There was actually, well, more than an imbalance. Some of her body had stopped producing certain hormones related to the thyroids, and then other hormones. Her estrogen levels were crazy high. So she started treating them with this doctor. And I mean, in a very short period of time, she completely changed. She regained control of her life from a situation that she had actually almost lost hope for. And it was in part this story and understanding how hormones, when they are balanced, actually really become our superpowers that led us to turn hormones in our book into superheroes, and showing, well, both what they do when they're unbalanced, but all the incredible things, like when your testosterone is balanced, you have high drive and motivation, and how they really become your superpowers and are there to get you through survival also.
That's wonderful. And it's actually really encouraging to hear that she was able to address that balance. But I think some really powerful lessons there, and that actually she didn't think to ask that question and nobody thought to actually mention it to her. And yet her hormones were having such an impact. So we have that kind of vicious cycle there between potentially workplace stress, mental health and hormones, and just reinforcing the need for all of that to really be in balance. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that, I mean, that really leads us on. We have Anna with us today, and Anna's been a huge champion for mental health in the workplace. Anna, we just heard about the impact of workplace stress and hormones, and therefore in turn of mental health. And of course, mental health is an issue, and it's very topical today. It's certainly been in the news over the last 2 days, you know, people really talking about how important it is to feel comfortable to actually raise issues of mental health in the workplace or at home. This is something that you've personally championed at Dentsu. So could you tell us a little bit about what personally drives you to be so passionate in what you're doing?
Yeah, for me, it's a very personal story and a very personal issue, in that my mum 10 years ago was diagnosed with very debilitating mental illness, which took everyone by complete surprise. My mum was somebody who was very strong, very resilient, very successful in her career, very sociable, and it really felt like it was something that came from nowhere. I think I was 35 weeks pregnant at the time, and really thrown into this crisis of helping my mum and helping the rest of our family navigate the mental health care system, which is incredibly challenging. And it was just so eye-opening for me to the fact that actually even the professionals don't really understand mental illness and mental wellness. They struggle to diagnose properly. They struggle to support people properly through treatment and long-term care and rehabilitation. So very much a personal story and a personal mission for me to better understand and raise awareness around mental health and mental well-being. And I just feel that I scratch the surface. There is still so much complexity, so much unknown. But I think one thing that is a fact, and everyone should understand, is that there is a very, very fine line between having good mental health and poor mental health. It's very fragile. And that's something that we all need to be hugely respectful of, in the way that a sailor is respectful of the sea. I think we as the human race have got to be very respectful of the fragility of the human mind and the human condition and human well-being. And whilst in some cases mental illness is non-circumstantial, in many cases, particularly in the kind of easier to treat, easier to support end of the spectrum, circumstances and triggers are quite significant. So really understanding and creating that awareness and that comfort to talk or just be able to ask for help when it comes to mental well-being is my strong area of interest.
Absolutely, and that's something that's really topical in the pandemic. You talked about circumstances. You think that's even more important now?
I do, and I think it's a real turning point. The pandemic in every way has been absolutely horrific. Just the level of disruption that it's caused, the level of grief that it has caused, the level of deprivation. Anna, you and I have talked about some of our worries just about the level of societal divide and division that the pandemic has created. And we just don't really know what the long-term consequences are. I think particularly in terms of the mental and the well-being impact that it's going to have on people. But I just feel that one of the really positive things to come out of this is that there is now so much coverage, so much mainstream conversation around recognising the fragility of mental health and how circumstances can really transform someone from having good mental health to poor levels of mental health. And so I think if one good thing is going to come out of the pandemic, I think just the fact that it has become normal now to talk about mental health. It is, in a very mainstream way, acknowledge that your mental health might be suffering as a result of the experiences that we, many of us have had during the past 12 months. So I think, very topical. But to reframe that, I think we can make something positive come out of this situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you talked about the need to talk about it really openly. One of the things that Farah and Kika have highlighted here is the connection sometimes between, our reproductive health and hormones, and actually the impact that can have on mental health. And quite often some people might be unaware of that. So, for example, if you break your arm, it's quite visible to people in the workplace, but actually individuals don't often necessarily realise that they're experiencing the symptoms. Do you think now we have a culture in the workplace where, for example, our male colleagues would be much more comfortable to have those kind of conversations if they're linked to some of those taboos?
I hope so, but it will take time, and I think for some people it will remain a really private matter, and that's okay. I think there are unique biological factors in women that might provoke a kind of unknown and an unseen and an unaware sense of well-being. And I think equally in men, I think men can be very deep and silent, and either not wanting to acknowledge a sense of a loss of well-being, or just feel very uncomfortable in speaking up. So as we really think about the best ways that we can support mental well-being and wellness in the workplace, I think as well as making it okay to speak up, I think it's about equipping people to recognise the signs, be that if you're a leader of people or just from an individual point of view, just raising that awareness and making sure that people understand the support and resources that are available to them for them to access privately if they don't feel comfortable speaking about it in a more public forum or domain.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic counsel. We've got two people on the panel here who are both investment bankers, Farah and Lilies. You both started your career in investment banking. I mean, we're talking here from the perspective of dentsu, which is 53% women in dentsu, but you've both started work in a very different environment. Do you think those taboos still remain in the world of banking, for example, Farah?
Yeah, so from my experience, I think there are processes in place to help people feel more comfortable openly talking about mental and physical health. It's like you say, if you break your arm, it's visible, so therefore you're ill, but often illnesses are not visible. I think the challenge that big corporates probably still face is that top-down approach. It's one thing saying to all employees, yes, you can come and speak to me, but if the managers or the top level are not instilling those behaviours, or at least getting the training around EQ and how they can support their colleagues, then I think there will always be a bit of a gap there. I think that takes time with big corporations. I can only comment from my previous experience at Goldman Sachs. It takes time, but I do think it requires a top-down approach.
Definitely. And Lily, is anything from your own personal experience to add there? Are we ready to discuss these issues in male-dominated environments?
I think it's one thing to say and one thing to practice. So I think one thing we have done well is there's been a lot of talk, and the talk has increased. But translating that into action, that's why we have not moved with speed. But I think the good thing is that we are talking and there's more talk. And there is some change in a few places. Well, maybe not a few, maybe more. But that translation to action is where the gap is. But there is more and more talk about these things. So if we can be able to sort of accelerate that talk into action, I think we'll be at a good place.
Absolutely, I agree. And Lilies, we've talked about empowering women to make more informed choices about their physical and mental health. You are an expert in malaria eradication, and whilst we often think of this as a global health challenge, I know from our conversations that in reality, this is as much a challenge of empowering women. Why are women so key to the malaria debate?
Thank you very much. And one thing that is there and is scientific is that women are much affected differently and in a much more greater way. So any any eradication for malaria, if it doesn't target women and girls, I have to include girls, then will not progress much faster. Why are women more greatly affected? Pregnant women are much more affected and infected for that matter. And this also goes to girls. And one of the problems, especially we have in Africa, and I guess it's all over, the stigmatization that comes along with the teenage pregnancy. So a lot of these girls do hide the pregnancy. So any support that they can get does not come on time. Then the other thing is that women, if you look in a household, women are usually affected both directly and indirectly. So even if they're not sick, they are sick by the fact that they have to stay back and care for the sick family members because they have that place of caregiving. And one of the things is that women, a lot of women are in the informal sector. There are much more women in the informal sector than there are men. So that means that this is unpaid for the time that either they are sick themselves or they're taking care of sick ones. Then there is a lot of loss in income. again, we look at the girls. We have talked about menstrual health, and in a lot of places in Africa where malaria is endemic, we also somewhat tend to also have a high poverty index. And when you look at menstrual health, we have girls who are missing school. So when you top up the number of days that these girls are also missing school because of being sick from malaria, then that's a whole potential, a whole loss of school days in a year that will affect the outcome. So women are at the core. If we have to really have that push, that we're talking about having malaria by 2023. We're talking about bringing malaria down by 90% in 2030. We're talking about eradicating malaria from the face of the earth by 2050. Women are at the center. Women will be the game changer in this. And there is so much more that needs to be done. We also need to look at ensure that people are seeing the gender perspective of malaria and really have it as an important aspect. Yes.
Yeah, and you made a really good reference there, an example there to exactly what we're talking today about the taboo, for example, associated with talking about teenage pregnancy, the impact that has on a girl or on a young girl in malaria, and then potentially whether or not she can fulfill her potential in life, and whether we can fully empower women and how important that is. And earlier you mentioned, actually, we can talk a lot about this, but what's key is getting people to take action. And in the frame around you, you have the wonderful Mundo artwork for the Draw the Line Malaria Against Malaria campaign, which of course Kika was directly involved in creating. This is all about getting people to move, from awareness to actually calling for action. What do we need to do to get women specifically, to break through these taboos and take action to claim back their future?
I think we need to start from the point of awareness that malaria is not, doesn't have to be with us. I think we have had malaria for hundreds of years that we have taken malaria to be part of us. We have to start from the point that this is a preventable and a treatable disease. And when we start from that point, then having that awareness of what we have just said earlier, that women are really at the center and they hold the key in accelerating this fight. So we need them to have women to understand that. We need to just see how much it is taking away from them. It is taking away for the young girls growing up, it's taking away their potential. We need the women to see it's taking away their earning power. We need them to see that there's a lot of opportunity costs being lost. They could probably live better if they were not dealing with malaria. And when people start to see the impact in their lives, in totality, within the community, and even how much is being spent on malaria and the opportunity cost that other diseases that are affecting them are not being attended to, then there will be that urgency, there will be that sort of anger to want to do something. So we need to get to that point that each of us and each woman want to do something about it, because we have seen that we are affected directly and indirectly. So if we want to do something about it, then women, we will get to the forefront in various ways that they can do it. We need to get women in leadership positions where malaria issues are concerned. If you look at vector control, it's a bit more male dominated. I don't know why we have felt that this is much more a man area, but we need to get more women in those kind of roles. We need to do much more to get them at a point where they can act, at a point where they can influence, and at a point where they're fully knowledgeable and they know what they can do, to the point that they can hold their leaders accountable.
Which I think is so key, and actually reinforces something that we've talked a lot about at Dentsu, which is the fifth Sustainable Development Goal, which is all about gender equality underpinned by having, you know, of women effectively participating in leadership and decision making, so that you can understand the contingency. And it's why we're very much focused at Dentsu in having 50% leadership, so that we can understand, you know, the audience that we try to serve. And some of within the malaria campaign in Africa, you actually have a lot of brands and businesses that are actively engaged. So I know, for example, Nando's, you know, you have the pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline. So we do see a role for brands to really stand up and be vocal on healthcare issues. And in fact, some of the major brands breaking down taboos in the media this week include Diageo and Vodafone, who've both been launching new policies on menopause. And Kika and Farah, I did want to ask you about this as well, and Lilies, I'll come back to you. But you know, what's the opportunity is for brands when they want to kind of associate themselves with these big taboos around women's health? Is it an opportunity? Are there any no-go areas? Perhaps Kika, can I come first to you?
Of course. To be honest, I don't know. I don't think I can answer if there are any no-go areas. I think it really depends on the brand we are talking about, and if that taboo or conversation is relevant to them and the product or the service they sell. I think there are so many opportunities for brands, because brands are very powerful, creating influence, and especially through creative communication. So what I would say to a brand is, if there is a topic that is relevant to your product or to your service, please put a light on it, raise awareness about it, because that is the way you become relevant as a brand, and you really can create change. And I think there's great examples nowadays of brands that are contributing so much to shifting perceptions in society.
And of course, Farah, you're a challenger brand that's going in there, but with a much deeper insight potentially into your target audience.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the level of the business, and like you said, if it's relevant. If it's not relevant, then you almost look like you're jumping on the bandwagon. But if it's relevant, for example, to your employees, and it helps, you know, if an employee is able to say how they're feeling or what is challenging them, whether it's menopause or any other issue, then hopefully that will help them in the workplace. If they've got the right manager in front of them who's going to help support them, that will increase efficiency and engagement, and that makes for a better workplace. But if it's like Lila said, if it's more all talk and no action, then what's the point? I mean, certainly with Hanx, we're a small company, we're a team of 4, we're all women. I think by being women, it helps that we're quite intuitive, and we've got a very flat culture. So, you know, no question is too stupid. If you have an issue, come forward, and collectively as a team we'll get through it. And I think having women on the team do help with understanding female challenges like menopause, like hormonal issues, but it really does come down to what's the purpose of creating these campaigns for Vodafone. If it's more for employees, then great. If it's jumping on the bandwagon, then you're not giving consumers the credit they deserve. They can see through some of this stuff. When you see big corporates jumping on this, consumers aren't stupid. They just want transparency. So it's really about what the mission is there.
Yeah, so it's being truly authentic and really thinking about the real value of brand and the relationship and the understanding you have with your audience. Yeah. And Anna, just does the same thing apply when you're thinking about communicating with your internal employee base? You know, Dentsu is an organization, I think the median age is 27. We have 43,000 people who presumably are facing different situations and different circumstances every day. So do you try and be all things to all people, or do we need to focus?
I think you've got to strike the right balance. So I think informing policy, particularly in new and emerging areas that may still provoke mixed responses or mixed views in terms of the degree of openness that people feel when it comes to communication discussion. I think it's really important to develop a fact base, and this is something that we came to learn as we were working on gender diversity. As you know, Anna, a significant pivot for us was our ability to really ground this in data and fact, and I think that that more naturally then leads to better understanding of what the issues are, what are the actions that you need to take, measuring progress, defining accountabilities, etc. And I think we need to apply a similar approach when it comes to understanding, what are the well-being issues that might be applicable to everyone in the workforce, that might have a gender-specific angle to them. So I think having the channels through which we can directly engage with our people and ask them what matters most to them, what are their biggest areas of concern, I think is really powerful. And I think a change in our habit that's been very much pandemic provoked is just the directness with which we now reach into our people and ask them very direct questions around their well-being and what matters to them and what are the issues that concern them, what are the triggers. And I think that way you can better gauge what response is required and how you respond in terms of the tone of voice, the communication, whether you're addressing an issue in a very open and broad way, or whether you're creating more private and discreet channels for dialogue and communication with your people.
So it's about knowing your audience.
Very much about knowing your audience, yes. And I think, when it comes to, I think organisations have made huge strides, but I think, employment policies has traditionally been an area that's been, been full of assumptions and, perhaps labour law led rather than through really listening to your people. And I do think this is quite a big shift in terms of employment culture. I think largely as a result of younger employees and the millennial generation coming into the workforce who communicate in different ways and through different channels, I think it's just created a much better dialogue and a more well-researched position in formulating policy and response.
That's great, fantastic. Thank you very much, Anna. And we've had a lot of questions coming in actually on the chat around mental health, how we approach it, and also how we encourage discussions in the workplace around some more sensitive challenges, for example, hormonal health. There is one question I do want to pick up here because I'm also intrigued. Farah, has Hanx had any challenges in getting visibility in the media? Have there been any standout media supporters of this business or surprising obstacles to promoting the business?
Absolutely. There have been a number of challenges. And I think I was probably quite naive when starting the brand that things would be quite plain sailing. We were initially a D2C brand. It should be straightforward to get on Instagram. No, that's not the case. We've probably had over 500 ads or types of creative banned by Facebook. It makes it incredibly challenging as a small brand to be able to get your product out there. We're not being garish and in your face or showing pictures of naked people. We're simply empowering women to take control of their sexual health with products that they deserve to see. So yeah, we've had massive challenges with the likes of Facebook. And I think additionally, outdoors, we've also seen that the type of creative that we've, perhaps it's just a sentence like OMG gonorrhea, for example, is the type of creative that we thought of, is far too salacious. So I think there are challenges that we've had to overcome as a brand where our tone of voice is honest, real, relatable. We've almost had to dial it back when actually trying to be that very thing. But I'm hoping times are changing. There are more sexual wellness brands that are coming out to play. It requires decision makers, women and men, who can see what our brand vision is, to realize that, we're not, just because we're bucketed in an adult health space doesn't mean so that we can't promote or shouldn't be able to promote our products.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And presumably social media is also enabling consumers to be much less passive and to actually drive the conversation that they want to have as well. Yeah. And Anna, we've got a question actually here that's come in, which I think is quite interesting, is how do we train management staff to be sensitive to women's issues? Are there any trainings planned at the moment, for example, within dentsu to help educate people?
So we are going to be introducing very, very soon, and this is under rapid development at the moment, leadership training that will cover 10,000 people. So anyone that's in a people management role, so not exclusive to just the more senior leader population, in understanding mental wellness, in understanding mental health challenges, how to recognise, how to have conversations. So it will be broad in terms of initiating a dialogue. It's not going to be specifically focused around issues that are unique to women, such as fertility, pregnancy, menopause. It's not going to be focused on issues that are unique to men, but it's around spotting the signs, and it's about providing people with the skills and the confidence to engage in a dialogue with people about their well-being. I think we've got to be mindful of the fact that we can't force people to talk about the issues that they're experiencing, and not everyone is going to be comfortable with sharing their concerns or their health issues in that type of personal format. So alongside the training, we're going to be running deep pulse survey actually at the end of April, where we're going to provide a lot of free format fields for people to talk in a very confidential way around the personal issues that they experience, the workplace triggers and challenges and tensions that can provoke well-being issues. I think to provide a diverse set of opportunities and channels for people to engage with us on the issues that matter most to them. And I think, once we have a better informed position, that is going to allow us to develop and tailor policies. It's going to allow us to further develop health insurance plans and the type of well-being services and physical checks that they offer, which are good but quite generic in nature, to perhaps be more specific and tailored to health issues that can be more gender prevalent or more age group prevalence.
So that's fantastic. So basically offering kind of bespoke services to employees that help to meet their needs.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so we're not there yet. We're starting with the education. We're starting with the dialogue that will provide us with the data set that will allow us to develop and evolve and make our policies and make our support resources more tailored and more bespoke to the needs across a very broad ranging employee group.
Yeah, and that education and dialogue, of course, is in turn going to hopefully break down some of these taboos and enable us to be able to have these conversations that potentially people don't feel comfortable having today. Right. And that in turn should help empower everybody. Thank you, Anna. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to go sort of to a quick round. The theme for International Women's Day this year is Choose to Challenge. So I would love to hear just, from each one of you, just one short sentence. Lilies, if you choose to challenge, what would you be choosing to challenge?
I would want to borrow this from our movement, the Zero Malaria Starts With Me, and for all the things that we've talked about today and say it all starts with me. If we start with each of us, then we're going to make strides in all the things that we are talking. So it starts with me.
Excellent. And if people want to do that pledge, they can go to zeromalaria.org. I'm going to do a little plug there. Excellent. Thank you. Kika, what would you choose to challenge?
Well, so many things, but let's see. This year, I choose to challenge actually gender bias in the workplace with, for example, gender bias in meetings and helping women have their voice heard in meetings, not be interrupted, or, well, if they are, ask them to please continue, and things like that. So to really visualize women and let their voices be heard.
Excellent. Thank you, Kika. And Farah, what would you choose to challenge?
So I'm all about actions, not just words. So I would do two things that I challenged this year. Find allies around you and that could be men as well, because we need men to be allies to supporters, to really for equalism. But the second thing I would say is really think about the partners that you're working with. You know, for us, yes, we're a female founded brand, but we will only work with people where we actually see women on the board, and don't be afraid to challenge that. You know, we've challenged that with PE companies. Well, you know, you really want to work with us, but I can see 15 white men on the board and no women. So, you know, back what you say and actually challenge that.
Yes, I completely agree. And Anna, finally, what do you choose to challenge?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things. I think that my choose to challenge has got to be around prioritisation, and helping people say no, helping people call out where, you know, they're overwhelmed by their priorities, or, you know, they're inadvertently being being asked to tackle an unreasonable quantity of work. So that's my choose to challenge.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. I would like to say thank you to all our panelists for their candor and their bravery as they continue to break new ground to empower women everywhere. And I think everything we've heard there today, you know, calling for gender diversity on boards, you know, calling out when we've just taking on too much. I don't think we're very good as a species at doing that, and actions, not words. The link between sexual and reproductive health, mental health and malaria to women's ability to reach her full potential is well documented. We have a role to play in breaking down taboos. So I encourage everybody watching to be bold, whether you're a man or a woman. In this way, we will build understanding, bridges and trust to a more inclusive world. So thank you so much for joining us.